I can see changes are happening. Thank you very much for those who are following the request. One last time, can I request everyone who's on the platform, except my colleagues who are interpreters, to please switch on their cameras so that we can be able to verify if your framing is appropriate. Just as a reminder as well, the session is going to be conducted in the 3 SADC PF languages, which is English, French, and Portuguese. Kindly go to the bottom of your screen to choose the language that is appropriate to you between English, French, and Portuguese, so that you can be able to follow the proceedings of today's session. Also, kindly please ensure that your video is on so that we can be able to ascertain that you've framed yourself properly. Good morning, Mr. Mukambo. Is it possible to use artificial light in there and switch and close the curtains behind you?
Artificial?
You mean switch on the light in the room and then use and close the curtains? Sorry.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Unless you can turn around and face the window instead of it being behind you. That would be much appreciated, because we can see your face, some sort of a silhouette now. We can't properly see you. Thank you very much. May Violet from Botswana. You are sitting.
Yes, please.
How are you, ma'am?
I'm good. Yourself?
Can you please tilt the screen a little bit towards you? Because we can only see your head without seeing you properly. There we go.
It's okay now?
Yes, it's okay. I'm not sure. Is it not possible for you to turn around as well so that the window is facing you instead of it being behind you? Because the lighting
Turn
is
around,
a little bit...
Oh,
yes.
okay. Turn in the computer.
Are
Myself.
Are you genuine on the computer?
Excuse me?
No, I was saying that, are you joining us from on your movable device, or is it a computer? The laptop.
Yes, from the laptop. Yeah.
Is it possible to turn around so that you are facing the window as opposed to it being behind you?
Well,
Maybe
I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible.
Maybe you sit on the other side of the table.
Because I'm projecting. The only place that I can face is the opposite. Otherwise, it's the window that I project on.
No, thank you very much. I think we'll make do with the. It's not the best quality, but we can live with it, I think.
Thank you.
Mr. Shivore, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
I'm good.
Mr. Mdemu, thank you very much. I think your picture quality is okay. We just need you to sit up a little bit and sit to the center of your frame, please. Because now it looks like you're sitting at the right corner of the screen. So if you can be centered, we would appreciate that very much. Be centered, and we have your head and shoulders in the picture as well, and a little bit of space above you. Mr. Shivore, your picture, are you using a movable device? Is it possible to turn it around? Because I see that you are using a portion of the screen as opposed to the entirety of the screen.
Okay, I'm using a tablet, so I think it's.
If you can, okay, no, go back to the other one. I think this one is the vertical one as opposed to the horizontal.
All right, this is the horizontal one.
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
One last time, can I request everyone who's on the platform to please switch on their camera so that we can be able to see the framing? Mr. Manuel, thank you very much for changing your position. We are seeing you properly now. Bom dia. As indicated, ladies and gentlemen, the session is going to be conducted in the 3 SADC PF languages. If you haven't done so already, kindly go to the bottom of your screen. There's an interpretation panel where you are able to choose the language of your choice between English, French, and Portuguese, which will enable you to follow the proceedings properly. Can I quickly do a roll call while we are waiting? Or Mr. Pebuka, Mr. Chivore, should I leave that to you?
No, proceed.
Thank you very much. Let's check in terms of the country representation, starting with Angola. Do we have representatives from Angola?
Angola está presente com Manuel Filho, diretor adjunto de Finanças da Polícia Nacional.
Thank you very much, sir. Could I kindly request that you change the naming of your device, start off with your country and then followed by the name, please, so that we are able to identify which country is represented. Botswana?
Correct.
Yes, Botswana is represented. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Botswana. From Botswana, we move to the DRC. Is the DRC here? Eswatini? Is Eswatini represented? Lesotho? Anyone from Lesotho? Madagascar? Do you have Madagascar? Malawi?
Yes, Malawi is represented.
Thank you very much, Malawi. Mauritius? Mozambique? I see a camera coming on. Is that Mozambique? Then we go to Namibia. Namibia not here. And then we go to the Seychelles. South Africa. Is South Africa not represented? Tanzania?
Yes, Tanzania is represented.
Thank you very much, Tanzania. Do we have Zambia?
Yes, Zambia is represented.
Thank you very much. Do we have Zimbabwe? Zimbabwe?
Uli. Tanditengereka not by the Vujin.
I'm trying to see who, have I skipped anyone?
Maybe Modise, you could ask Zambia's representative to put the country name on the name.
Yes, sorry about that. Mr. Kunda, could you kindly change your naming on the device that you're using? We're starting off with the country and then followed by your name and surname, please. Can we ask everyone who's also on the platform to please do the same? The name of your organization, followed by your, or else the name of the country and then followed by your name. Apologies, just for 1 second. I need to take this call from my colleagues from Parliament TV. I think they're still struggling to join. Apologies for that. As a matter of emphasis, let me just remind one last time that we are going to be doing the session in 3 SADC PF languages, which are English, French, and Portuguese. Kindly choose the language of your choice at the bottom of your screen so that you are able to follow the sessions properly. Once again, the session is going to broadcast on various social media platforms and recorded for later broadcast on Parliament TV, which is found on DSTV channel 408. So we kindly request everyone who's on the platform to bear that in mind. We request you to all times keep your microphone closed, microphone off, and every time you take to the platform for broadcast purposes, we request that you switch on your video so that we are able to see the person that is speaking for record purposes and also for posterity purposes, because the session is going to be on those social media platforms for a long time after the session has ended. So kindly bear that in mind. And also there are various social media platforms where we'll be tweeting and about the proceedings of today. I'm going to send on the chat box various messages that indicate where we will be broadcasting and the hashtags that we can use. We'll kindly request all the participants on the platform to please share their organization's social media platform so that we can tag you on the communication that you're going to send out. Before I hand over to the facilitator for today, Mr. Pepukai Chivore, who is from the Zimbabwe Parliamentary Budget Office. Mr. Chivore is an accomplished economist and director of Zimbabwe's Parliamentary Budget Office. He's a technical, he provides technical support to Parliament and its committees on issues related to the budget. His role is to ensure effective participation of Parliament in the budget process and other economic affairs. The PBO, as the Budget Office is commonly known, is tasked with providing independent, objective, professional advice, analysis, training to Parliament on matters related to the budget, economic policy, and money bills. He has broad expertise in fiscal analysis, economic research, macroeconomic analysis, forecasting, and international trade. Let me hand over to him without wasting any time. Thank you very much, Mr. Chivore.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by maybe welcoming everyone to this meeting. I see Angola, Botswana, Malawi, Tanzania, and Zambia. Welcome to this program where we are discussing the SADC model law on public finance management. It's a consultative meeting with policy representatives involved in investigating financial crimes and related offenses from the SADC member states. And I also welcome representatives from the Secretariat, SADC PF Secretariat. And without much further ado, We will welcome other participants as they join in the meeting. And it's already 10:16. And let's move straight to the welcome address. And they will get that welcome address from none other than Ms. Boemo Sekoma, our Secretary General of the SADC PF. Madam, I leave this time to you to give us the welcome address.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies. Bonjour, bon dia, good morning. Our keynote speaker, General Ketla John Sithole, who is the National Commissioner of South Africa Police Service and SAPCO chairperson, distinguished representatives of police of SADC member states involved in investigating financial crimes and related offenses in your hierarchy, Mr. Daniel Greenberg, our legal drafter for the SADC Model Law on Public Financial Management, members of the Technical Working Group on the Model Law on Public Financial Management, our facilitator for the meeting, Mr. Pepokai Chivore, the Director for Parliament Budget Office, Parliament of the Republic of Zimbabwe. SADC citizens, following proceedings on various social media platforms, members of the media, staff of national parliaments and the SADC Parliamentary Forum, distinguished participants. It is with undivided pleasure that I welcome you to this event organized under the auspices of the SADC Parliamentary Forum. As you may be aware, this event forms part of a series of consultations for the development of the model law on public financial management. And it is taking place pursuant to consultations with policy representatives, namely ministries, as well as other stakeholders in the financial landscape, such as auditors general, accounts general, representatives of anti-corruption agencies, to mention but a few. We are therefore progressing in the calendar of consultations, and as we make strides ahead, it was paramount of importance to consult with police representatives. Distinguished participants and delegates, globalization with its fast-speed movement of goods and services across borders and amongst institutions and persons has inevitably increased financial crime in our region, and in the process undermined our financial systems and crippled economic growth. Financial crimes have debilitating effect on business and business opportunities. They have caused our region huge losses, including loss of employment opportunities, leading to inequalities that also give birth to other forms of crime. Distinguished participant, digitization and the concomitant hacking and other associated crimes that come with it are major issues, not only for the law enforcement agencies, but also for financial institutions. It is therefore imperative to arm the police with what, in my view, reflect the best legal provisions anywhere else in the world regarding regulation of public finance issues. As the adage often says, no law is good law unless it can be enforced. Distinguished delegates, consultations with the police representative present today, who are on the forefront of law enforcement, are thus pivotal to a holistic appreciation of the public financial model law. I wish to underscore that in addition to police representatives, prosecutors will also be engaged in the sessions to come. Hence, the different stakeholders in the prosecution of crime will be comprehensively heard. Distinguished participants, police representatives are the defenders of the state. and are directly involved in enforcement of public financial management provisions. They inquire and investigate financial crimes and conduct forensic audits which reveal criminal financial transactions. Police are the first point of call when criminal activity is detected, and they take statements from complainants and victims of financial irregularities. They are active players in the solving of crimes, and they testify in court for the prosecution. Distinguished participants, police representatives can also act as expert witnesses, depending on their field of specialization. And they can be handwriting experts, forgery experts, DNA specialists, and much more. More importantly, police representatives also depone in parliamentary committees, and they shed light on parliamentary matters investigated by the National Assemblies in our SADC region or the Senate. Was it not for the bravado and zeal of police representatives in Southern Africa, many complex financial transactions would not have been understood and detected, such as the Ponzi schemes and offenses related to reinsurance. By your connections with international authorities such as Interpol, you are also involved in detecting cross-border financial crime, which occurs around the globe. Furthermore, you are the brain as well as the muscle of the state's enforcement arm. In this respect, you have the ability to conduct arrests of defaulters and to apply reasonable force where necessary. Distinguished participants, I must highlight that at this juncture, that is why it was necessary to engage police representatives separately from line ministries and departments or prosecutors, particularly because of the immense respect and deference given by the SADC Parliamentary Forum to the principle of constitutionalism. Indeed, in many SADC member states, the power of the police are derived under the Constitution, and thus the police is considered as a completely independent and autonomous organization, which operates with a constitutional mandate buttressed by the rule of law. The SADC Parliamentary Forum recognizes the sacrosanct independence of the police force, which in itself is a tenet of the democratic framework of the state. It is well known that the head of the police force, that is the Commissioner of Police, does not take instructions from any other person or authority, except for policy issues. In the detection and investigation of crime, it is known that the police is completely sovereign to act based on the appropriate police law, which has been duly enacted in Parliament. Since the police is constitutionally independent, it was thus important to garner your views in a distinct consultation where you would have full leverage to engage among yourselves and with the presenters, especially the legal drafter. Distinguished participants, today we expect that police representatives interact openly and frankly with our legal drafter, Dr. Greenberg, and the rapporteurs in view of addressing the enforcement provisions of the public financial model law. You will kindly note that the provisions of the model law cover the main public financial management processes of the state and do not address in detail the prosecution of corruption or financial crime. This is because all these financial aspects could not be covered in a single piece of regional legislation and will be dealt with separately at some later stage. Dear colleagues, Representatives today are thus requested to consider the enforcement aspects of public financial management only, as they appear in the model law, and to link those with domestic police legislation. Part 11 will thus be most relevant to police representatives today. These relate to financial misconduct, misuse, and maladministration. Part 6, dealing with parliamentary control, will be equally relevant to the extent that police representatives are sometimes summoned to appear in parliamentary committees to give evidence on offences committed under executive authority. I wish to add that provisions on powers of arrest for financial misconduct have not been provided for, since these will be covered under the usual police laws and regulations. Dear colleagues and distinguished participants, to contextualize this consultation, I wish to emphasize that the Public Financial Management Model Law is a benchmark for the inspiration of national parliaments. It will need to be domesticated progressively by parliaments through local legislation passed by a majority of members of parliament. Whilst domestication is usually a process conducted by the executive, police representatives can advocate for domestication through policy engagement with line ministries and by highlighting the areas for improvement which will be contained in the model law. Through line ministries, police representatives may also be involved to interact with the dedicated organ of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, the Regional Parliamentary Model Laws Oversight Committee, which is entrusted with the task to monitor the provisions of the model law in collaboration with national parliaments. You may thus be called upon to engage with the Oversight Committee of the Forum to provide reports or shadow reports of the state on domestication of the legislative provisions pertaining to public financial management. It should be noted that besides engaging with the Oversight Committee of the Forum, some of the norms relating to public financial management may appear in other regional or international instruments. Hence, you may be called to engage with other monitoring bodies related to good governance, as well on the way towards full domestication. As I end, I would like to reiterate the SADC Parliamentary Forum recognizes the contributions of police representatives to the safety and security of the SADC region. Today, financial crime is no longer only pickpocketing or burglary. Today, criminal activity has become as intricate and sophisticated as it can get, with schemes and scams which are almost undetectable to the common individual. The police is the only independent authority which has full investigatory powers and the competencies to detect financial irregularities and uncover maladministration. Without this safeguard, the financial system may dangerously brim insolvency. The police force, therefore, stands as a staunch pillar to ensure that democracy continues to stand tall and proud. With these words, I wish you a pleasant session and fruitful deliberations. Thank you, Director of Ceremonies.
Thank you very much, Madam SG. If it was a physical meeting, we would have given you a round of applause, but I'm sure all participants are giving a round of applause in their hearts and in their offices. Thank you very much. That was very powerful. And colleagues, you agree with me that it was a very powerful speech from Madam Secretary General, where she highlighted the dangers of globalization as it relates to the economic and financial challenges, especially related to financial crimes that come with the globalization. And like she rightfully pointed out, no law is a good law unless it can be enforced. Thus, we are here so that we can assist each other to come up with a very good law that can be enforced. And she also highlighted the pivotal role that the police force play in the public finance management, especially related to combating these financial crimes and cross-border crimes. And she also highlighted some of the particular sections that we also need to look at as they relate to our areas of jurisdiction. Thank you very much, Madam SG, for those powerful words. I see Madagascar has joined us. Madagascar, good morning. We welcome you to this meeting. Good morning, Madagascar. Can you hear us? Okay, I think we can proceed. It's now time to invite our guest who is going to give us a keynote address. And that is none other than General Kela Stole, the South African Police Service National Commissioner and Chairperson of the Southern African Regional Police Chiefs Corporation, the SAPCO. If I can give a brief bio of General Kela Stole, who is a National Commissioner of South African Police Service. He joined the SAPS in April 1986 as a student constable and became a commissioned officer in 1988. And over the years, he rose through the ranks to lead the SAPS in various positions. Among some of these prominent positions he has served include serving as a provincial commissioner of the Free State province in South Africa, Deputy National Commissioner for Policing in the SAPS, Divisional Commissioner of the Protection and Security Service in the SAPS. Moreover, he was appointed National Commissioner of SAPS in November 2017, a position he currently holds. In addition to his responsibilities as the National Commissioner of SAPS, he was also appointed SAPCO Chairperson from 1 August 2021. Sir, I invite you to give us the keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Program Director, for the opportunity. Let me acknowledge Her Excellency Ms. Boema Skoma, SADC Parliamentary Forum Secretary General, distinguished representatives of police of SADC member states involved in investigating, Mr. Daniel Greenberg, legal drafter for the SADC model law on public financial management, members of the technical working group on the model law on public finance management, facilitator for the meeting, Mr. Pepkai Chivo, Director, Parliament Budget Office, Parliament of Zimbabwe, SADC citizens following proceedings on various social media platforms, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you. I'm honored to be given this opportunity by SADC Parliamentary Forum to address this gathering in my capacity as SAPCO Chairperson. Distinguished guests, this consultative meeting with police representatives of SADC member states on the draft SADC model law on public financial management is of great significance because it will enable us to come up with better ways of managing financial resources. Ladies and gentlemen, financial resources are central to the work that we do in our respective countries within the SADC region. Therefore, it is a relief to all of us and our stakeholders today that we have reached a critical stage where as SADC police representatives of the SADC member states are able to present to the SADC Parliamentary Forum the draft SADC model law on Public Finance Management for consideration. The model law will ultimately assist us to ensure that we conduct business efficiently and transparently through the established model law on public financial management. This will in turn ensure accountability by all member states, as we will have a legal framework to work with. This particular legal framework would also enable us to set a foundation for a policy metrics on which we can link our strategic designs that are supported by integrated resourcing, as well as linking our performance management review processes so that we are able to account. Over and above this, we will also then be able to make a shift from budget to investment so that we can look at the return and account from the various states. Ladies and gentlemen, I implore all to interrogate the draft law model and make valuable contributions to ensure that at the end of the day, this draft have become a document we all own and we are all proud of. In as much as Mr. Daniel Greenberg and his team work tirelessly on this draft legal framework, we too need to contribute inputs to ensure where there might be blind spots or gaps, we are able to cover them in the interest of producing quality work that we can all indeed be proud of. I think this will also then further assist us to enhance the establishment of a NEF center in which we can then deal with one of the aspects of harmonization of the legal process or legislations within the various country member states, as we will be continuing with our integration as well as multidisciplinary collaboration. The process will also further enable feasibility analysis so that we can then be able to make sure that while we strike the balance between all the member state countries, none of the countries are placed at a disadvantage or maybe targeted unfairly by criminals. Distinguished guests, this draft piece of legislation is a significant milestone because we are working towards ensuring that we not only enable our parliament to openly conduct their budgetary and oversight functions, but it will promote transparency and good governance, which are the key pillars of good corporate governance in any public or private institution. The SADC model law must serve as a yardstick and regulatory legal tool for us to strengthen our regulatory framework on financial management and integrate the model law in our respective finance regulations and policies. These policy regulations are not cast in stone, as they need to be reviewed by applying established norms, monitoring evaluation and principles to ensure that they are viable and constantly in line with international best practices and conform to progressive reforms. I envisage that the SADC model law could inspire an amendment in regional policy and statutory laws through its outlined remedies and promulgations, which are meant to improve regional standards on public finance management systems. I'm confident that public officials and institutions falling under the SADC member states will take a leave out of the model law and promote adherence to the set rules and institutional policies that govern the use of public funds and take decisions that are in the interest of the citizens we serve. It is critical that as public representatives, we must execute our duties with professional and continuously exercise our responsibilities with integrity, impartiality, and accountability. Over and above this, we must be responsive to the needs of our region and meet expectations and overarching needs of the citizens of our member states. The SADC Public Finance Model Law promotes sound public finance management principles and highlights transparent and effective management of assets, expenditure, revenue, and liabilities by public institutions and governments of SADC member states. This will therefore ensure that transgressions from the norms and established rules are handled effectively. We will do this by implementing policies and legislative measures that will empower us to deal with malfeasance. I am thankful to all the experts and stakeholders who shared their expertise and best practices to ensure that we achieve our objective by giving rise to a purified and intensified administrative document on public financial management, which will be presented for adoption at the forthcoming 51st Plenary Assembly session of the Forum. We are steering the ship towards the right direction as the establishment of the SADC Model Law on Public Finance Management Act will ensure that we address perpetual gray areas and allow us to respond effectively to our core business and the needs of this community. The administrative and financial loopholes that we identified as member states due to lack of judicious corporate governance practices will soon become a thing of the past. Prudent financial management and planning will be the order of the day, and I am certain that this is an outcome which we all have been longing for. Through this refined model law, we will be able to execute our fiduciary duties without ambiguity, and there will be uniformity on how member states manage their budgetary and supply chain processes. As an institution, there is no better way to eradicate maladministration than coming up with this draft piece of legislation, which will hopefully be assigned into law. I think the rand and cent value of this whole process, it's gonna enable us, firstly, as I indicated in the beginning, to come up with an effective policy metrics on which our strategic designs could be based from an integrated and multidisciplinary collaborations point of view. But secondly, it will create a platform for integrated resource planning between the member states with very effective accountability. It will further enhance our shift from ordinary budgeting to investment and return strategies. And it will, above all, help us to rise above the interrelated factors that are always disruptive to our strategies, such as your unemployment and as well as your poverty. We will then be able to suppress them from taking higher influence so that we do not get caught by them. And lastly, I think our grand economic strategies across the SADC region, they will be secured, and the region will have a dynamic growing economy, which will in actual fact make us the best region, conforming to our vision as SABCO, to ensure that SABCO becomes a model police region in the world. We dedicate our thankfulness to the team through Walt Disney. Disneyland will never be completed, but it will continue to grow for as long as there's imagination left in the world. Kennedy, he who sees the invisible can do the impossible. And Chamfort, vision is the art of seeing the invisible. Once again, thank you very much for the platform, and thanks for the work to the team. I thank you.
Indeed, very powerful words from you, Commissioner. And we want to thank you so much for that keynote address, for agreeing to grace our meeting and giving us that powerful opening address. Honorable Police Commissioner for the South African Police Services, General Kela John Stolle, we want to thank you so much. And indeed, we need to own this process and we need to be proud of it. And we really need to input into this process so that we can own it, so that we can be proud of it. And where we feel there are gray areas and blind spots, let's be open. Let's share those ideas so that we are alive to the needs of our countries, to the needs of our region, as we try to bring that uniformity in policing across the SADC region. And so that we also remove that ambiguity in enforcement as we try to ensure that we reduce these financial crimes. So the model law is just a guiding legal instrument for our national parliaments to reinforce their domestic legal, financial instruments and public finance management. Thank you so much, Police Commissioner, for those words. If I can see if we have any other member countries who have joined besides Angola, Botswana, Madagascar, Malawi, Tanzania, and Zambia, do we have any other member countries who have joined? Any member countries who have joined? If not, then we have to move. I think with those powerful words from our police commissioner, let me just invite our SADC PFICT team to play a video clip, and let's pay particular attention to this video clip as it relates to the work that we are gathered here today to do, which relates to the public finance management and the role of our police services in the SADC region to ensure that we strengthen our public finance management frameworks within our respective countries. SADC PFIT team, please.
Every year, African countries lose an estimated $88.6 billion as illicit capital flight, according to the 2020 edition of UNCTAD's flagship report, Economic Development in Africa, entitled Tackling Illicit Financial Flows for Sustainable Development in Africa. Today, we're unpacking the issue of illicit financial flows out of Africa with Paul Akawumi, who's the director of UNCTAD's Division on Africa and Least Developed Countries. Paul, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Paul, before we get into the details of some of the impact that illicit financial flows have on the African continent, could you help us better understand what exactly we're talking about when we use the term illicit financial flows?
In the report, we define illicit financial flows as movements of money and assets across borders that are illegal in source, transfer, or use. And they can take the form of tax and commercial practices, illegal markets, terrorist financing and theft, or corruption. Tax and commercial practices represent the greatest issue for Africa. Up to 65% of illicit financial flows, according to the UNECA estimates. Illicit financial flows also occur through trade misinvoicing, typically the under or over invoicing of commercial transactions. The report focuses on illicit capital flight, which are defined as the outflows of financial resources from a country in each period that are not recorded in official government statistics. And we found that illicit capital flight from Africa reached $88.6 billion annually between the years of 2013 and 2015. Clearly then, illicit financial flows are a significant and a shared problem between developing and developed countries.
Paul, would it be fair to say that some sectors are more vulnerable than others?
Absolutely. In Africa, the extractive sector, the telecommunications sector, and the financial services are the most vulnerable sectors to illicit financial flows. Since most countries in sub-Saharan Africa are commodity dependent, export flows related to commodities are focus of this particular study. In 2015 alone, according to our estimates, Africa lost at least $40 billion in primary extractions of resources and between $30 to $52 billion to trade misinvoicing. Misinvoicing occurs primarily with high value, low weight commodities such as gold, diamonds, and platinum being particularly vulnerable. And in gold alone represents 77% of all total under-invoice exports, diamonds representing 12%, and platinum representing 6%, and all the other exports make up the 5%.
And what about countries, Paul? What did the report find? Have some countries been more affected by illicit financial flows than others?
When we look at the capital flight estimates, the top 5 countries with the highest illicit financial flows as a share of GDP, and we have to look at for the data that is available, are Sierra Leone, Congo, Seychelles, Burundi, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The 5 countries with the lowest level of IFFs as a share of GDP are Algeria, Sudan, Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, and Morocco.
Now, Paul, we've mentioned several times that illicit financial flows cost African countries an estimated $88.6 billion, which is equivalent to about 3.7% of GDP. So could we talk about some of the socioeconomic consequences of illicit financial flows?
There are tremendous impacts. Illicit financial flows are not only a drain on domestic financial resources, but they are also correlated with lower government spending on key areas for development. The results of our model show that countries with high illicit financial flows spend 25% less on health and 58% less on education compared to countries with low illicit financial flows. As a result, women and girls are disproportionately negatively affected by IFFs, as they are the majority beneficiaries of public health and education expenditure. The report also finds that illicit financial flows are negatively associated with labor productivity growth, undermining productive capacity and achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal number 8 on decent work and economic growth. In countries with high illicit financial flows, agricultural productivity is 67% lower.
Paul, in your answer, you mentioned Sustainable Development Goal 8, which is the goal focused on decent work and economic growth. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the Sustainable Development Goals. The report says that curbing illicit financial flows could help reduce Africa's Sustainable Development Goal financing gap by half. Could you explain a bit more to us what that means?
We mentioned earlier on that $88.6 billion US dollars is capital flight out of Africa. And that's nearly half of the estimated $200 billion US dollars needed annually in Africa to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. This money could have compensated for the 60 to 90 billion US dollars that the African Development Bank estimates is needed annually to provide universal electricity access by 2025. Recent estimates by the African Development Bank, this 2018, suggest that the continent's infrastructure needs amount to between 130 and 170 billion a year. with a financing gap in the range of 68 to 108 billion. Potentially then, illicit capital flight could cover almost all of the infrastructure financing gap to meet the related SDG targets.
And if we're able to see just how much illicit financial flows cost African societies and economies, and we're also able to identify the sectors that are more vulnerable, why has it been so difficult for African leaders to stop these illicit financial flows out of the continent?
Good question. Illicit activities are, by their mere nature, inherently difficult to record. And this is due to the differences in legal and regulatory frameworks across jurisdictions. For example, it is difficult to separate illegal actions, for example, tax evasion, from illicit and licit practices, for example, aggressive tax avoidance and lawful tax planning. Now, efforts to stop illicit financial flows on the continent are constrained also by the lack of statistics. The measurement of trade-related IFFs in Africa is critical to combat them. However, such information is typically scattered across a range of institutions at the country level, and there is no single data source from which to derive these relevant statistics.
So, Paul, what recommendations does the report make?
Well, in the report, we propose a 10-point plan for tackling illicit financial flows in Africa, which centers on meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. Within this framework, we suggest coordinated action by a range of stakeholders. Firstly, at the institutional level, the policy guidance aims at contributing to multilateral cooperation to combat illicit financial flows. And at the domestic level, the regulatory framework must be strengthened. Data collection and reporting on trade, including at the transactional level, should be strengthened. Enhanced regional cooperation on reporting standards for firm-level tax and commercial information is also needed. Now, African governments should seek to collect more data and better data, potentially incorporating the use of UNCTAD's automated system for customs data, ASICUDA, including its special Mineral Output Statistics Evaluation System, MOSES. Now, national data should also be reported to international databases such as UN Comtrade. In many ways, addressing illicit financial flows is a matter of ethics, and civil society organizations, whistleblowers, and investigative journalists have played a critical role in revealing the magnitude of IFFs and the mechanisms that support them in Africa and beyond. Transparency initiatives must be encouraged and continue to be encouraged, including their use in new technologies.
Thanks, Paul, for helping us unpack the issue of illicit financial flows out of Africa. And this is the subject of the 2020 edition of UNCTAD's flagship report, Economic Development in Africa.
What a powerful video on illicit financial flows. Thank you very much, our IT team, for that video. And I think we've heard that Africa is losing in excess of 88.6 billion every year through illicit financial flows. And in that video, the director, the UNCTAD director, tried to identify why it is difficult to stop illicit financial flows. And part of the reasons include the differences in legal and regulatory frameworks across the continent. And it is for this reason that we are coming up with this model law. And like what General Kela John Stolle said in his keynote address, he said we need to bring uniformity across the region so that we can deal with these cross-border crimes. We need to remove that ambiguity, and so that we are very clear on what is legal and what is illegal. So I think this model law is coming at the right time when we are trying to fight these illicit financial flows. And perhaps we then need to identify some of the gaps that we feel are in the model law so that we strengthen it to ensure that it is enforceable right across the region. Thank you very much for that video. And I'm challenged because in that video we heard that the drain on domestic resources is causing serious underfunding of social services, including health, including education, which are suffering because so much of our resources are going up. At this juncture, Honorable Commissioner General Se, General Kela John Stolle, Honorable distinguished representatives of police from the SADC region, Madam SG and your team, our model law drafter, Dr. Greenberg, and the technical team that I'm also part of, as well as SADC citizens who are following this discussion. It is now time to invite Dr. Greenberg, our model law drafter, to come and take us through this model law. Dr. Greenberg has a very long and expansive career across the globe in model law drafting or in law drafting in general. He is a barrister specializing in legislation and the legislative process, and he currently serves as a counsel to domestic legislation in the House of Commons. By the way, he is a British citizen. He is currently serving as a general editor of Westlaw UK, Thomson Reuters. Dr. Greenberg has a law degree from the Cambridge University in England and has over 30 years experience in legislative drafting and machinery of government. He has drafted several legislation as set out in his very long CV, very impressive CV, and he edits 2 legal dictionaries and an international legal journal. He has worked with the governments and parliaments in UK, in Albania, in Wales, in Falkland Islands, in Isle of Man, in Myanmar, in Malaysia, Nigeria, Northern Ireland, Solomon Islands, South Georgia, Sri Lanka, just to mention but a few. He also has extensive experience as detailed in his curriculum vitae. And he's also a teacher of legal drafting skills, including intra-government and external consultation process. And he writes legislation and the machinery of government issues. Dr. Greenberg, I leave this time to you to take us through this model law on public finance management.
Mr. Facilitator, the Honourable Mr. Shivore, thank you for your introduction. Honourable Madam Secretary General, the Honourable Distinguished Keynote Speaker, General Sithole, and if I may extend also a welcome on my behalf to those members, citizens and members of the public of SADC states who are joining us either contemporaneously or indeed after the event through a range of social media. This model law belongs and will belong to you, the citizens of SADC states, and your engagement and involvement is greatly appreciated, and your suggestions will be taken very seriously indeed when made to the SADC Parliamentary Forum Secretariat. Distinguished facilitator, in view of the timing of today's session, we are running a few minutes late, and in view of the very specialized interest of distinguished delegates and esteemed colleagues present here today, I propose to take us through the model law with a certain degree of celerity And I will, of course, be very happy to answer any questions that arise on matters that I do not touch on in sufficient detail in my remarks. Before I do that, I wish to make two underlying points about the rationale in the approach to drafting that has been taken in the model law with, I should say, Mr. Facilitator, Mr. Shivore, I should say, with the intense scrutiny and involvement of the technical working group, of which you are an ornament, and which has done so much to strengthen the model law's provisions leading up to this present consultative series of forums, which will, as has already been clear from consideration to date, further strengthen and enhance the model law, and all comments of distinguished delegates and esteemed colleagues are enormously gratefully received for that reason. My first preliminary point is this. In legislative drafting, one is always seeking to effect a balance between conflicting desiderata. In this case, there are four separate balances that have required to be struck. First, a balance between simplicity and certainty. It is vitally important, and distinguished colleagues from police forces around the region will, I think, have a particular sympathy with this point. It is vitally important that a law is simple if it is to be effective. Police officers need to be able to grasp the fundamental principles of a law that they are required to enforce through the investigation and prosecution of criminal offences. And that requires an element of simplicity, of structure, of brevity that enables police officers individually and collectively to master the provisions in a way that they can then deploy effectively. But this is a highly technical, complicated subject. And to balance that simplicity, there is a complexity required to achieve certainty. So we have tried, Mr. Facilitator, we have tried to adumbrate the fundamental principles of each provision and then support it with a level of technical detail. Similarly, we must balance accessibility and accuracy. I have already mentioned the importance of engaging citizens in the process of preparing the model law, but they must also feel ownership of it and engagement with it after its enactment. And for that purpose, they need to be able to understand it. So it must be in accessible, clear, plain language, as well as with a simple structure. It must incorporate language that a SADC citizen feels speaks to her or him in a way that they can significantly understand, accept, support, and indeed in some respects implement. But balancing that accessibility has to be a technical accuracy that speaks to the complex professional issues raised by this model law. And again, the structure of the provisions, I hope, shows our attempt to grapple with this conflict of aims and provide an accessible law that is also sufficiently accurate to support the professional complexity of the matters with which it treats. Third, yes, as I've said, we have to make this model law very clear, but clarity has to be balanced additionally with flexibility. If I may, before taking you through the draft line by line, or part by part at least, if I may draw the attention of distinguished delegates to one part that will be of particular interest to delegates today from a perspective of anti-corruption, money laundering, and similar criminal issues, proceeds of crime. If I may advert to part 12 on cryptocurrencies, that will illustrate this conflict between the desideratum of clarity and the desideratum of flexibility. We have to deal with crypto assets. I don't need to tell distinguished delegates and esteemed colleagues this morning, I don't need to tell you, you would be much better placed to tell me of the increasingly fundamental role that crypto assets are playing in crime of many, many different kinds. And public financial management has to acknowledge that crypto assets are here to stay. There are central banks already considering issuing their own cryptocurrencies. But whether that happens or not, and maybe it will never happen in the SADC region, it doesn't matter. There is no country today that is not exposed from a public financial management perspective to crypto assets and cryptocurrencies in one way or another, be it through procurement issues, be it through on-lending issues, be it through state-owned enterprise issues. In one form or another, there is a direct financial impact of crypto assets, and any public financial management system has to be able to value them, classify them, and be able to trace them indeed, insofar as that is a practical possibility. So with the express support of the technical working group, to which I have already referred, Part 12 has been added to the model law to lay down principles that directly relate to the classification, valuation, and regulation of crypto assets. And yet, if we were to do that in a way that accurately reflected the position today, the model law would be doomed to instant obsolescence, because we don't know, we cannot know what the challenges of crypto assets are going to be in 3 weeks' time, never mind 3 years' time. The field is changing so rapidly in all respects. So, distinguished colleagues will have noticed from the footnote to the introductory clause in Part 12 that we have adopted the regulatory principles taken from the London School of Economics and Political Science Institute of Global Affairs, Basic Principles for Regulating Crypto Assets, 4th draft. But we have incorporated a flexibility that should enable governments and parliaments to react to real-world changes and developments in the use, classification, valuation, and therefore regulation of crypto assets. One example of how we have tried to combine a clear approach with a flexible approach. And finally, but very importantly for the distinguished delegates today, yes, we have to use a principled approach. We have to speak to the morality and responsibility of individual public officials, but enforcement is key. And we have specific new criminal offences at the end of the model law that I will take you through in a few moments, that are designed to ensure that public officials understand that those who fail to live up to their own, to the demands upon their own morality and personal responsibility will be brought to justice by a system of enforceable and practicably enforceable criminal offences. The second preliminary comment I wish to make is to remind distinguished delegates that this model law has to deal with a multiplicity of constitutional and legislative arrangements throughout the SADC region. Therefore, at many places in the draft, you will see footnotes adverting to the need for contextualization. And that contextualization requires to acknowledge different constitutional arrangements, but also different legislative arrangements. Madame Secretary General, in her introduction this morning, already drew attention to the fact that a number of issues are already dealt with by SADC regions, by SADC member states, in ways that show a different approach to the overlap between public financial management and certain specific financial issues, notably corruption, fraud, and proceeds of crime, and other aspects of illicit capital flows. Therefore, the model law is to be understood as requiring domestication in a way that will reflect the political, constitutional, and legal arrangements of each jurisdiction, so as to avoid overlap and so as to avoid conflict. Honourable facilitator, with your permission, I will now share my screen and draw just very briefly the attention of distinguished delegates to some specific features of the model law. I ask the SADC Secretariat to confirm that delegates are now able to see my screen.
Yes, Dr. Greenberg, we're able to see it. Thank you.
Thank you. For the reasons given in my preliminary remarks, the model law tries to entrench fundamental principles and values, and I draw delegates' attention to part 2, where the aims and objectives are set out not in the preamble, although they will also be found there, but in operative provisions of the law itself. These are substantive provisions to which the courts will give legal effect, and they entrench as primary principles involved in counterbalancing those features that facilitate illicit capital flow: accountability, transparency, independence of the public financial authorities, and modernity, through an efficient and effective series of processes dealing with raising revenue, spending revenue, and resources. And again, I do not need to remind distinguished delegates today, they will be better placed to tell me, that we need to focus on resources, not just cash accounting. And when we come, you will see later that the provisions on accounting look at whole of government accounts from a resource account perspective, accounting for receipts and expenditure and parliamentary oversight. And in order to reassure the citizenry that this is not just pious exhortation, it is enforceable law. Clause 10 provides for the imposition of a system of measurable outcomes, so that officials are aiming to optimize revenue and expenditure and to prevent unauthorized expenditure against targets that are measurable targets. The same for sustainability and the same for accountability and oversight by the legislature. The minister is directly required to operate a scheme designed to specify measurable benchmarks for testing success in achieving those outcomes. The law then lays down public financial management principles, transparency and participation of those whose ownership will ensure effective enforcement. And again, I am sure that distinguished delegates today do not need me to tell them that a law that the citizen feels they own is easier to enforce. It enforces itself. A law from which people feel estranged is very difficult to enforce. Oversight through the democratic institutions, and finally, the principle of responsibility, to which I have already alluded, for the purpose of which we articulate the values of public financial management: integrity, independence, impartiality, equity, professionalism, accountability, and responsiveness. And in clause 13, the final provision of part 2, the contextualization to which I drew attention in the context of domestication is expressly provided for. Part 3 deals with the main authorities that deal with the enforcement of the regime of public financial management: the ministry, the permanent secretary in charge of finance in the civil service, the finance ministry with its general functions at a level of detail, balancing principle and detail for the reasons that I gave earlier, accounting officers with individual responsibility within each public office, and referring to the Auditor General, who is dealt with later. Part 4 deals with the public funds, the consolidated fund, and also other accounts: retention accounts, trading accounts, debt servicing accounts. Part 5 deals with supply and appropriation following the standard system, subject to the parliamentary control under Part 6. And that control takes place in accordance with the parliamentary engagement principle, which we had the privilege of discussing with parliamentarians from different committees and perspectives at an earlier stage in these consultative forums. The Auditor General's role is set out in detail in Part 6, along with the role of the National Audit Office. The Public Accounts Committees, with whom again we have been privileged to hold discussions, have their responsibilities and powers set out in some detail in the same part. Part 7 deals with the national budget process, again subject to parliamentary control, always in accordance with standing orders, because the model law does not wish to be prescriptive, of course, to individual countries and regimes and jurisdictions as to how they achieve the parliamentary engagement principle in accordance with their own parliamentary realities and processes. The budget process is standard. We have, however, strengthened the references to accompanying documentation, departmental objectives, sustainable fiscal policy statement for each budget, sustainable development goal statement for each budget, international commitment statement for each budget, equality and diversity, enhancing citizenship, citizen engagement and ownership, an equality and diversity statement, so that every citizen feels that the annual budget as part of the public financial management process speaks to them and reflects their concerns and their priorities and their objectives. And then again, matching flexibility with certainty. We do have provision for past year and future year implications, multi-year budgets, in-year development, adjustment budgets, in-year budget reports, delays and variations, environment and withholding, and the treatment of unauthorized expenditure. Flexibility requires that we acknowledge the possibility of all these things, but we contain them within an envelope of oversight, scrutiny, accountability, and transparency. Part 8 deals with government borrowing and the public debt, including broad classifications of public debt and the issue of securities, and, as I mentioned before, on lending and guarantees and indemnities that might not be classically identified as public debt, but which ultimately give rise to an exposure of state liability. The debt ceiling, leading something to which the technical working groups, distinguished members have paid special attention, leading to not being prescriptive about what debt may be, but leading to enhanced processes for scrutiny where the debt exceeds a certain ceiling. Part 9 deals with procurement in accordance with the principle of transparency and accountability, with variation for emergencies, because of course procurement must not be allowed to stifle reaction to real-world events. Part 10 deals with the public accounting principles, and as I said before, it does that from a resource accounting perspective and having regard to a whole-of-government account system. The Part 11 deals with financial misconduct, misuse, and maladministration, and I said I would return to this and highlight these. Here is an offence of public financial misconduct that aims at any public official who fails to comply with the provision of the Act or of regulations, provided that they cannot show that they took all reasonable steps to comply or could not reasonably have known. Penalties, and I draw this to the attention of delegates today, who will note that penalties have to be left to each jurisdiction to find effective and proportionate penalties that work in your own circumstances. An offence of misuse of public funds, which again, in evidential terms, I don't need to explain to distinguished delegates and esteemed colleagues today, has significant advantages over the misconduct offence. Maladministration is not here made a separate offence because it has its obvious evidential difficulties, but it is used as a way of picking up some of the slack given the evidential and practical difficulties of bringing successful prosecutions for misconduct and misuse. Maladministration is much broader, and it leads to, in accordance with the separation of powers, it leads to disqualification, potential disqualification consequences and not criminal sanctions, and it could be very effective for that reason and in those terms. Part 12, cryptocurrencies, I have already described. And finally, just to note in part 16 that there are provisions made for supplementary regulations and for guidance, but always subject to parliamentary scrutiny, so that the executive is exhorted to expand the detail of this model law in order to make it work effectively, but always subject to parliamentary oversight. Honourable Facilitator, I am pleased to say that I have returned us to the timetable for today. I've returned us to track for the timetable. I will pause there, therefore I will conclude my remarks there, but I will of course be very happy to expound or expand upon any particular issue on which any distinguished delegate would like further information. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greenberg, for such elaborate presentation of the model law, where you began by giving the background to the issue, the basis to the model law, and took us through the provisions, the main provisions in the model law. And I'm sure our respective police representatives were listening. And if there is any area that they feel they need clarification or a little bit of some explanation, Dr. Greenberg is here to give that explanation. And if there is any area again that you feel needs to be adjusted or amended, or perhaps has been omitted, you are free to raise those issues. Our rapporteurs will be taking note, as well as Mr. Greenberg, our drafter, is here to answer to some of the issues that you are going to raise. But of particular interest, I know, to our police services representatives who are here, to do with perhaps the penalties that you also highlighted, and the issue of cryptocurrencies again, chapter 12, which are growing in Africa. And I'm told, I read a certain report, you are saying cryptocurrencies grew by 1,200% in 2021. And Africa is very fertile ground for the growth of these cryptocurrencies, although they are still very much illegal in most of our countries. Thank you very much, Dr. Greenberg, for that elaborate presentation. We now open the floor for comments, discussions, suggestions, or questions to Dr. Greenberg or any member of the technical team or SADC PF who are here. Feel free to raise your hand or write your comment or question in the chat platform. Our IT will assist us perhaps to draw our attention to your comment in the chat platform. I open the floor. Anyone who wants to come in first with a comment before we go country by country, we are just opening to anyone who wants to make a comment or a question before we go country by country. Distinguished participants, do we have anyone to come in first? Dr. Greenberg, you have been so elaborate. People have no questions. Okay. Perhaps we go country by country. If we can start with Angola. Angola, do you have anything, comments, suggestions?
Oh, sim. Alô? Alô?
Hello, Angola. Whilst we are still waiting for Angola, I think we can take the question from South Africa in the chat platform. It's Selo Morane. Pardon me if I didn't pronounce it correctly. They are saying, good morning. I would want to establish if this process of lawmaking is predicated upon any best practice reflection from either the West or Asian region, and what lessons, including operational law enforcement capabilities from developed countries. I'm not sure who is going to take that. Dr. Greenberg, if you want to take it.
Yes. The simple answer is yes, the model law represents a fusion of approaches from a variety of jurisdictions, both including SADC member states and countries and jurisdictions from literally around the world. The technical working group has been particularly helpful. It's been helpful in a wide range of ways, but it's been particularly helpful in bringing expert experience of public financial management from literally every area of the world. And the model law benefits enormously from representing a fusion in that way. If I may, in response to the Honourable Police Chief of South Africa's comment in the chat bar, if I may say, I completely agree that the enforcement capabilities are specifically where domestication needs to reflect local reality. So the principle in the model law is very much a fusion of universality, and the enforcement practicalities are more heavily weighted towards SADC regional specific local provision. As to lessons on enforcement capabilities in relation to virtual currencies, I repeat what I said before, that because crypto assets are at such a very early stage, practical regulatory lessons are thin on the ground. And any that distinguished colleagues, distinguished delegates today, any experience they have to offer and could perhaps put some lessons learned in writing by way of submissions to the Secretariat will be enormously valuable and gratefully welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greenberg, for that response. I think they then made a follow-up to indicate that their question is relating to virtual currencies. So I think lessons including operational law enforcement capabilities from developing countries on virtual currencies and whether it's predicated upon best practice. I think you have answered in general that is predicated on best practice, but perhaps they wanted a particular reference to the virtual currencies. I'm not sure if the honorable participant is answered, or you may need to take it again with particular reference to virtual currencies.
No, I mentioned them at the end of my remarks, and unless there are further questions, that's all I have to say on the matter.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greenberg. Any more follow-ups on this matter or any different matter that distinguished participants would want to raise? Distinguished participants, the floor is open for comments, questions, and suggestions.
Hello.
Yes, please proceed.
Yes, in Tanzania.
Tanzania, please
I'm
proceed.
particularly interested in. Yes, I'm particularly interested in Chapter 12, the cryptocurrency. I believe those who invented this cryptocurrency or the visual currency had good intentions, but very unfortunately, in the early stages of these cryptocurrencies, I believe it was grabbed or it was taken advantage by those who pioneered the pyramid schemes. So many of our country has, when you mention the cryptocurrencies or the visual currencies, they have a bitter or terrible experience because I believe not much education was in place when these things was expanding. It is expanding very fast, but I don't see deliberately or much time and the resources are invested in educating people first. There are people who are participating in the legal machineries and other law enforcement. So it's expanding very fast. In our country, when you mention these cryptocurrencies, people have terrible experience because we had things like OneCoin, the Bitcoins. I believe we all know the OneCoin, how it ended. People invested a lot of money in OneCoin, but it is associated with the cryptocurrency, but it turns out to be the pyramid schemes, and now it has collapsed. The founders are nowhere to be found, and people lost a lot of money. In my country, we also had the accounts for this OneCoin. They had a company here in our country, and they opened the account. And those accounts were used to collect money from participants. But once it collapsed and it was found to be a pyramid schemes, those investments were forfeited by the government. It was very unfortunate. But so when we mention cryptocurrencies, people had terrible experience because in initial stages it was taken advantage, it was grabbed by those pyramid schemers. So it is closely associated. When we mention it, people think it's a pyramid. It's pyramid. Not much knowledge is invested in the people who are participating, the people who are in law enforcement. So I urge that these before these cryptocurrencies could be accepted or could be adopted, we should invest a lot of effort, money, resources in educating people who are participating, educating the law enforcement agencies, the court, the police, the prosecutors, so that they could be able to distinguish the pyramid schemes and the cryptocurrencies, because I can see a very thin line between these things. They're somehow associated with the pyramid schemes. So that is my contribution. Are there any efforts being made to invest in educating people first? Because I don't see these future things are expanding very fast. There are very attractive promises made. People are promised to their investment to be doubled, tripled in a very short time. So many people are short of ideas, like investment ideas, like those who are retired. When they get their lump sum and they hear someone could double or triple their investment in a very short time, they will rush there. So in the end, it ends up to be pyramid schemes, and then they lose their money. So how much effort is invested in, in educating people first? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tanzania, for that question. And I would want to agree with you. Whenever you mention the word cryptocurrency, people would associate it with these pyramid schemes and everything. So there's really need for education. And like I said before, it's still illegal in most of our jurisdictions, but we are seeing it growing. And I think in 2021, by November, we are told that about 103 countries had directed their financial regulatory agencies to develop regulations and priorities for financial institutions regarding these cryptocurrencies, with the only 42 countries having been identified as having those implicit bans on cryptocurrencies. So you see, if 103 countries have warmed up to these cryptocurrencies, and about 42, most of them African countries, still have implicit bans. That's why perhaps we have this section on cryptocurrencies just to serve as a benchmark and a guiding legal instrument for our national parliaments to reinforce their jurisdiction in case they would want to adopt these cryptocurrencies. But I open the floor to Dr. Greenberg or any member of the technical team or SADC PF who may want to respond to the question from Tanzania in terms of educating citizens on cryptocurrencies. Dr. Greenberg.
I respectfully agree with everything that the distinguished delegate from Tanzania said, and that you have just said, Mr. Shivori. And in terms of the structure of the model law, I have nothing to add.
Thank you. Any distinguished participant who may want to add to this discussion? Hello, distinguished participants. We are still on the issue of cryptocurrencies. The question from Tanzania on educating citizens. Anyone who may want to take it? Hello, anyone? Perhaps we'll come back to it, but allow me at this juncture to go to our chat platform and read the question from Colombo Pascal. It's in Portuguese, but there has been a translation to English. What are the most viable mechanisms that can be implemented in this bill so that more effective control in combating the flow of cross-border criminal offenses, or so that we can have more effective control in combating the flow of cross-border criminal offenses? I see Dr. Greenberg has already responded, but perhaps I can give you the floor so that you can expound a little bit, Dr. Greenberg.
Cross-border implementation of criminal offences is already dealt with by recognition of judgments in a number of international conventions to which SADC member states are party. If the distinguished delegate has any specific concerns in relation to the mechanisms of cross-border enforcement, perhaps they would be kind enough to embody those in a written submission with any suggestions, and we will definitely consider strengthening the cross-border enforcement. But my primary response is that it will be in accordance with the standard cross-border recognition enforcement mechanisms, including recognition of judgments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greenberg, for that response. I hope the distinguished participant has been answered. If not, they can bring another question or follow-up. The floor is still open for any comments and suggestions. We may show by raising of hands. If not, then we have to go then country by country for any comments or questions or suggestions. I had recognized earlier on, I had recognized Angola before the distinguished participant from South Africa then raised the question in the chat platform. I give the time to Angola if they have anything. Angola, please proceed. Angola, please proceed. If not, we pass. Angola, can you hear me?
Penso que as comunicações estão muito boas. Alô?
Yes, I was saying.
Alô? Está-me a ouvir? Não consigo perceber. Bem, a parte daquela questão que eu já coloquei em relação aos ilícitos criminais transfronteiriços, eu penso que a nossa realidade não estão a ouvir?
Hello.
Não estou a entender.
I didn't get the English translation. I'm sure colleagues can assist me if there was English translation for the intervention.
As comunicações não estão lá muito boas.
Hello, colleagues from SADC PF. Was there translation? I didn't get it. If there was translation, perhaps.
Sim. Alô? Sim? As comunicações estão a apresentar algumas dificuldades e há esse interregno na comunicação. Atentamente acompanhamos a intervenção do nosso jurista e o projeto de lei sobre a gestão das finanças públicas, adequando, na verdade, com a realidade do nosso país no que concerne à calculação
Thank you very much. Like I said before, I didn't get the English translation. Colleagues, can you assist me if you got that one? Hello, SADC PF, Secretariat.
Hello, Mr. Chwore.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the interpreter is indicating that because of internet problems on the end of the Angolan representative, they could not hear him properly. He was trying a retake, and then he also was kicked out, or there's something that happened with his internet again. Maybe you give him a chance when and if he comes back.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you very much, sir. Distinguished participant from Angola, will give you a chance so that you can retake your question or comment. Whilst you are working on improving the connectivity, perhaps we can move to Botswana. We'll come back to Angola. Botswana, if you have anything.
Good morning, Mr. Facilitator.
Good morning. How are you, ma'am?
I'm good, yes. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Firstly, I would like to concur with my colleague from Tanzania with regards to cryptocurrencies. I think we need to teach public on the issues of cryptocurrencies, because in our country right now, we have a few cases that involve cryptocurrencies, and we working with financial intelligence, we are handling these matters. But because we as law enforcement officers also, we are not familiar with the cryptocurrencies. So much as we can teach the public, we also need to be very familiar. This Monday, just this Monday, we passed the law on cryptocurrencies. So maybe we still need to go through the laws to see how best we can assist the public. And secondly, I wanted to ask Mr. Greenberg if this law would anyhow assist us in dealing with other countries on the issues of financial, financial crimes are inherently transnational. So I'm not sure if, because we always have problems when seeking assistance from other countries. So I'm not sure if there's somewhere that we're going to get assistance that will fasten the investigations when we are dealing with other countries. Because mutual legal assistance, they normally take long. Police to police, they cannot, some of the things that they cannot assist us to some extent. So I'm not sure if there's anywhere that we could be assisted in that regard. Thank you. Yes, I somehow feel that in the law, there should be expedition for member countries to be coerced, if that is for lack of a better word, to assist the other member countries on issues of financial crimes. Otherwise, the funds will dissipate in no time. Thank you.
Point taken. I had given the floor to Dr. Greenberg perhaps to respond to your very valuable contribution. Dr. Greenberg, if you have any comment.
Yes, look, this is very difficult, and I'll explain why. This is a bill about the internal public financial management of each SADC state. It is not a bill about cross-border criminal enforcement cooperation. Now, I completely take the point of the distinguished delegate from Botswana, and as she says, this matches points made by distinguished delegate from Tanzania. I completely take their point that in relation to illicit capital flow and other matters of financial misconduct and abuse, I completely take the point that they are very international, as are many other crimes, but they are, they do present a particularly strong flank of requiring international cooperation. I completely agree. But the model law itself is not the place for strengthening the general law relating to international criminal cooperation. But I repeat to the distinguished delegate from Botswana what I said in response to the distinguished delegate from Tanzania, that if there are specific aspects of the international, cross-border, extraterritorial, criminal or other systems that relate specifically to matters that arise in relation to misconduct and abuse as set out in Part 13, and particularly in relation to those as they affect cryptocurrencies, let us have some thoughts in writing on what we could do to strengthen them, and we will definitely think about it so far as we can within the constraints of a bill about internal public financial management. I know that will be a disappointing response in some respects, but I hope that distinguished delegates will appreciate the constraints within which this particular model law is forced to operate.
Thank you very much for that response. I hope the distinguished delegate from Botswana is answered, and she also echoed the sentiments from Tanzania that there's need for civic education on cryptocurrencies, because I hear Botswana have passed legislation to do with cryptocurrencies, but the citizens, including even the law enforcement agents, may need education on cryptocurrencies. So I think I hope our secretariat has taken note. Efforts can also be at national level and even at SADC PF level in terms of educating citizens on cryptocurrencies. Do we have anything from Botswana before we move on to Madagascar?
No, thank you, President.
Thank you, Madam. Madagascar, you can come in. Madagascar.
Oui. Bonjour tout le monde. Allô? Vous m'entendez? Vous m'entendez? Allô? Vous m'entendez? Je suis le directeur de la police
Yes,
judiciaire.
sir, we can hear you.
Ah oui, oui, bonjour. Oui, bonjour tout le monde. Je me présente, je suis le directeur de la police judiciaire au sein du ministère de la Sécurité publique de Madagascar. Donc, je voudrais seulement adhérer au souci de notre collègue de Botswana. En effet, le crypto-monnaie est encore un phénomène qui est vraiment encore inconnu ici dans notre île. Donc, je voudrais seulement demander, est-ce que la SADC peut faire des séances qui est vraiment claires mais faciles à comprendre pour le grand public, parce que, à mon avis, il faut sensibiliser le grand public le risque de cette crypto-monnaie. Et même au niveau de notre pays, la plupart des services de répression et de la poursuite de ce trafic est encore très loin par rapport à la connaissance vraiment du phénomène crypto-monnaie. Donc, c'est pour ça que j'adhère à l'observation de notre collègue de Botswana. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, distinguished delegate from Madagascar. Dr. Greenberg, did you get that?
Yes, and I completely support the sentiments expressed. Indeed, in my earlier remarks, I drew attention to the fact that cryptocurrency as an issue and crypto assets more generally are developing so fast that anything we say about them in the model law has to be flexible and capable of being adapted to develop to real world changes. I also said, and I think the distinguished delegate from Madagascar will probably accept this, I also said that cryptocurrencies are now seeping into particularly the criminal establishments across the board, and those countries that have not yet had to grapple very much with it as an issue will surely have to do so at some point in the future, and therefore I support very strongly the sentiments expressed by the distinguished delegate.
Thank you very much for the response, Dr. Greenberg, and thank you very much, Madagascar, for that intervention. If you have anything to add, you can come in. Not, we move to the next country. We move to Malawi. Malawi, if you can come in now.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Are you hearing me?
Loud and clear. You can proceed, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. First and foremost, let me thank Mr. Greenberg for the good presentation on his draft. Maybe there could be a question. And I think I'm speaking like a police officer, an investigator, but I was also looking at, say, representing Malawi, but there are also other law enforcers who may also benefit from the same draft which has just been presented. I would just want to know how is it going to be taken as a matter of maybe awareness to other law enforcers? I was taking it, for example, in Malawi, maybe we work hand in hand in terms of collaboration in our fight against the financial crimes. We work like together with the customs, the SCB, and we have the Financial Intelligence Authority. How do this maybe come to their knowledge? Is it possible that Mr. Daniel Greenberg can move around the study countries and give awareness? Is it possible? It was just a matter of interest. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for that intervention. Mr. Greenberg, you can respond. Then also our Secretary General, Madame Boemo, can also come in.
Yes, I will leave it to Honourable Madam Secretary General to address the general implementation strategy and information strategy aspects of the extremely important question. I will, if I may, make one observation in response to the distinguished delegate from Malawi, and that is this. One of the reasons why the model law places particular emphasis on the involvement and scrutiny of parliamentary committees and the National Audit Office within each jurisdiction is that they are capable of bringing together all the different enforcement agencies and other stakeholder interests within that jurisdiction and publicize the new system internally, enhance the understanding of all enforcement agency and other stakeholder interests in how the system operates. And so I think in terms of, and Madam Secretary General will speak to SADC Parliamentary Forum's plans for publicising and for increasing information, but I would say that internally within the bill, the involvement of Parliament is not only for oversight, it is also expressly for the enhancing of understanding internally among all relevant enforcement and other stakeholders. And I hope that is of some use to the distinguished delegate from Malawi.
Thank you, Madam SG, you can come in.
Thank you very much for those valuable inputs. At this point, I can only note that there is a thirst for a mechanism to address some of the issues in the model law much more extensively. Our focus currently as SADC PF is mainly limited at capacitating the institution of Parliament. However, because we operate through a multi-stakeholder technical working group, which includes academia and many other stakeholders involved in this particular PFM framework, we will endeavor to ensure that our post-adoption strategies are robust and do indeed take into account the parts of the model law in order for us to facilitate domestication. We appreciate that the landscape in SADC is varied and very uneven, and therefore it would be upon us to pull the technical support out there to look to the north and south and look at what is it that we can do to bolster the acceptance and integration of the SADC model law in the region. I hope that suffices for now. It is broad and general. I would not want to commit ourselves in an area that is very new to us and a model law that will still require much more, much more in-depth review towards informing the post-adoption strategies. I thank you. I hope this is acceptable for now. Thank you.
Thank you for the response. I hope the distinguished delegate from Malawi is answered. If you have any follow-up, Malawi, the floor is to yours.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine.
Thank you. If you answered, then we move.
Apologies, yes. Just to also indicate that we, like Dr. Greenberg always emphasizes, there's a lot that is not known yet on cryptocurrencies. And we would, for the efficacy of the model law, we are not going to go further than just focusing on the management or putting light or making visible the area of management of cryptocurrency. So I hope that that also is, the context within which we are looking at this particular component.
Thank you for that further clarity, ma'am. South Africa came in earlier on. I'm not sure if you still have anything, South Africa. The floor is yours. You can come in now. South Africa, the floor is yours. Distinguished delegates from South Africa. Oh, I guess we have to move. Again, Tanzania came in earlier on. I'm not sure if you have any more contributions, Tanzania.
Not anymore, please. I'm just listening and observing others. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Zambia, the floor is yours.
South Africa wanted to. My apologies, South Africa. Can I intervene?
It's South Africa.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. You can come in. Then we'll have Zambia after you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity, and thank you for Dr. Greenberg for the well-articulated presentation on the endeavor to develop the law on the financial management system. And I sympathize with you because I can imagine people such as myself, which are law enforcement particularly inclined. Most of us, perhaps we're not so much abreast with the legal formulations and the law development. Hence, you would see most of us are so hell-bent on the questions or the interest of technicalities, more so on the issues of virtual currency and cryptocurrency. From our side, I think we will welcome the intervention that was made by the SG as well as the Dr. Greenberg in so far as the process is concerned, which is more focused on developing the laws that would perhaps be populated around the region so that we could have sort of semblance in as far as the region is concerned regarding financial management. Nevertheless, having said that, I'm also mindful that with the assistance of Regional Bureau, the SADC Secretariat would want to take charge and make sure that the issues of interest that were raised on virtual currencies by the participant, it's something that would be taken at that level. And it's for us as RB and SADC perhaps to have participated in this platform. We have gained knowledge as far as the law and the direction which the law is taking cost, but I would then encourage that perhaps as the SG has said, that we need to come up with an intervention that would look at capacitating law enforcement on issues of technicality on how to deal with virtual currency, cryptocurrency, how to monitor issues of crime in the dark web and the dark net, because these two are interrelated. And yeah, I believe this is where I would conclude my remarks and appreciate the process that is the SADC Parliamentary Consultative Meeting taking us as far as the direction which law enforcement would want to piggyback on this and make sure that we operationalize and then we inform and develop capacity in our law enforcement in the region. I thank you.
Thank you very much for that intervention. I think I'll give Madame SG a chance at the end to respond to these issues because it was more of a comment. Perhaps you'll combine with other comments that came from other distinguished participants at the end. Zambia, I'm coming to you so that we can also come in with any intervention, comment, or suggestion. Zambia, the floor is yours. Distinguished participants from Zambia, are you hearing me? Zambia, are you still in the meeting? Right, I think we can go back to Angola, hoping the technical issues have been fixed now. So Angola, you can come in now.
Ok, bom dia a todos os delegados presentes, em especial o senhor Dr. Guimi, e sobretudo pela belíssima apresentação que fez-nos, ou que brindou-nos esta manhã. Daqui é o intendente Agostinho Neto Amaro, chefe de departamento dos crimes tributários da Direção Nacional de Ilícitos, de Investigação em Ilícitos Penais da Polícia Nacional de Angola. Na verdade, na intervenção do Dr. Guimi, algum aspecto chamou muito a atenção, que tem a ver com a moeda Criton, é mais ou menos isso. Esta moeda, na verdade, cá no nosso país, ainda não está boa porque é desconhecida, não conhecida. Começa a preocupar-nos na qualidade de sermos uma polícia de investigação criminal, tendo em atenção o nível de perigosidade que esta moeda representa a nível dos países membros desta comunidade. Portanto, eu gostaria de saber se de facto a nível da nossa comunidade já existe um programa a longo, médio prazo que visa, de alguma forma, educar os nossos concidadãos sobre o controle a ter sobre esta moeda, de forma a não defraudar a economia dos nossos países. Uma vez que esta moeda é pouco conhecida, gostaria que, e como um ponto de vista já nesta conferência, que se gerasse planos a nível dos países da
Thank you.
Alô?
Dr. Greenberg, I'm sure you...
Alô? Sim, está-me a ouvir?
Oh, he's back.
Ok, muito obrigado, muito obrigado. As comunicações aqui estão muito baixas, a internet está muito baixa, então cria dificuldade mesmo. Mas vou aproveitar já agora. Tal como dizia, eu gostaria que houvesse um plano, um programa que, de alguma forma, visasse a educação financeira a nível dos países membros, de modo a que, a nível desta região, tenhamos todos a mesma linguagem, tenhamos um controle cerrado sobre o combate a este ilícito criminal que está a penetrar a nossa região. Uma outra questão, na verdade, tem a ver com
Thank you. Thank you very much, distinguished delegate from Angola, for that intervention. Mr. Greenberg, if you have anything to say.
On the question of training, no. And again, it may be that Madame Secretary General will allude to that in her closing remarks. But I completely support everything that the distinguished delegate from Angola has said about the rapidly accelerating and developing challenge in relation to cryptocurrency, because it grows all the time and changes all the time. And I am not at all surprised to see that it has been a focus this morning, because for law enforcement, cryptocurrency and crypto assets are one of the biggest challenges of today. Again, I feel constrained to remind distinguished delegates that the aspects of cryptocurrency that this model law can deal with are relatively constrained to the public financial management aspects. And it may be that the SADC Parliamentary Forum will give consideration on another occasion to the other criminal and regulatory aspects of crypto asset emerging strategy.
Thank you very much for that response. We have communication from Zambia that they are facing network challenges, but they are following the meeting. So they have connectivity challenges. But if you have anything that you want to raise, you can write in the chat platform, or you can write to the SADC PF for incorporation into the model law. Or if it is a comment or a suggestions, you are free to write. I realize that we may have other participants who joined midway through the meeting. I now open the floor to any of the participants who may have joined midway through the meeting to come in, if any, or any of the participants we had from the start of the meeting who have something to say before we close the meeting. The floor is open. I think I saw Zimbabwe when they enabled their camera. The floor is open.
Good afternoon, facilitator, and good afternoon, Ms. Dr. Greenberg, for the presentation. We really appreciate the work that you've put in it, and we're looking forward to operationalize it once it's adopted by the member countries. So,
distinguished participants, the floor is still open. You can come in.
Facilitator, can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, that's Joseph Musoni from Zimbabwe. I was just speaking. I'd actually said thank you very much, facilitator, for coordinating this meeting well, and also the presentation that was made by Dr. Greenberg on the model law. It's just unfortunate from my side that I just saw the draft this morning just before the meeting, and I had no opportunity to go through it in detail. So I'm not going to make a lot of contribution to it. But what I wanted to point out in regards to the development that you have done so far is, as a country, we have got a national law enforcement task force that incorporates all the agencies that are working on law enforcement issues. So from time to time, we sit down and we discuss the law enforcement issues at a national level. So I would also want to take this draft to that committee so that we can bisect it and see how best we can improve, so that when it comes out, it reflects our concerns and the gaps that we find in our daily operational activities. So if you can allow us some time, that I can also do the consultation and then submit our presentations on that. And then I also echo the sentiments that were raised by my colleague from South Africa in terms of driving the process forward, in terms of raising awareness and capacity building to deal with issues such as, emerging issues such as cryptocurrency. Perhaps I can share, not trying to say we're doing something or we are ahead of what everybody else is doing, but I can tell you that we've been working with the UNODC. There's a consultant who has been taking us through on cryptocurrency, asset forfeiture, the management of crypto assets. So in terms of building capacity in that regard, I think we are somewhere now as a country. And I would want to see that process being spearheaded again at the SADC level, regional level, as well as our regional Interpol Bureau here in Harare. Perhaps they can actually bring us together to, take it forward. And then maybe probably make a comment to the point that was raised by my colleague from Botswana on regional cooperation in terms of investigations, the mutual legal assistance. I take cognizance of the fact that SADC developed a protocol on mutual legal assistance in criminal matters. And I feel there's need to do more in terms of operationalizing it, which is where we are lacking right now. If we use the traditional systems that we are using at national level, you find it takes time, like she was saying, to get the necessary cooperation that we require. So if we can take that process forward as SADC Secretariat, like imploring upon the member countries to take the necessary steps so that they kind of bridge the bureaucracies that we are facing at the moment in terms of getting the much needed mutual legal assistance to finalize investigations in time. I think that can also help us from the law enforcement point of view. And then the Malawi issue is quite relevant and very varied that he raised. Like, for example, in my country, we have what we call the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission. They are also seized with the matters of investigating financial crimes, particularly those like the government misappropriation of funds, which this bill is trying to address. They are also involved in that investigation. And then we've got other law enforcement agencies that are working on it. So it would be good that we bring them on board on platforms like this so that we move together as a country. Maybe that would be another consideration that you can take into account. And then lastly, thank you so much for having us on a platform. I hope next time, please involve us in time so that we can also prepare adequately. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Msoni, for those valuable comments and contributions. From these comments, Dr. Greenberg, I give you the floor if you need to respond.
No, merely to welcome those observations and to say that I look forward to seeing the future submissions to which the distinguished delegate referred.
Thank you. Do we have any other countries who have joined midway through the meeting? The floor is open, they can come in. Any remarks, distinguished participants, before we invite the Secretary General? I think I'll give another round or another call, the final call to any participant who has something to say, comments, suggestions, questions to Dr. Greenberg or the SG or any member of the technical team regarding the SADC model law on public finance management, which is going to serve as a benchmark and a guiding legal instrument for national parliaments to reinforce their legal framework with regards to public finance management, which we know is not prescriptive, but it's just a guide. Any comments, honorable delegates from the SADC member states? If not, let me take this opportunity to thank you for the valuable contributions. Those who wish to send in written comments, you are free to do so. You can write through our SADC secretariat. I know Zimbabwe promised to send in comments after consultations. Distinguished delegates, distinguished Commissioner of the South African Police, Honorable General Kela Stole, distinguished representatives from the police across our SADC region, Madam SG, and our model law drafter, Dr. Greenberg, the technical team, and citizens in general who are following this discussion. It has been a pleasure to facilitate this meeting. Before I end, I see there's a comment that is just popped in. I think it's from, seems it's from Zambia. They are saying there are various LAE involved in investigation in Zambia under respective acts. Is there a specific LEA agency that would be mandated to deal with type of legislation that's Zambia? Before I end this conversation, Dr. Greenberg, you may want to take that.
I think that's an interagency question, which is beyond my brief.
Okay. So I now invite Madam Secretary General, Madam Boemo Sekoma, to give us her concluding remarks as she also responds to some of the issues that have been raised by distinguished delegates from Angola, Botswana, Malawi, Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Madagascar. Madam Secretary General, the floor is yours. Seems like your microphone is muted, Madam SG.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me now?
Loud and clear now, please.
Oh, apologies for that. Allow me to applaud the participation and interest that has been demonstrated by our participants today. This was expected. I'd also like to indicate that please send your comments through to the SADC Parliamentary Forum. We will be happy to look into those comments. Where possible, we'll be able to integrate them. Even if we do not integrate all your comments, these may give us some input into offshoots for future work that the forum must be able to generate. Let me also share with you that currently the forum is going through an operational model that is bound to transform it into a regional parliament. And this is something that the summit is seized with. We are now at the stage where the treaty is being looked into and proposed for amendment so that the SADC Parliamentary Forum can become part of the SADC institutional framework. One of the issues that I'd like to point out is the fact that this SADC Parliament will focus on the development of model laws. So your comments are welcome, as they may give us some fodder to be able to work with. Especially, we'll focus on issues that would advance the vision of the SADC Parliamentary Forum as a flag bearer of democratization and sustainable development in the SADC region, with close consultation with the SADC policy organs. Allow me to also indicate that I looked at what SADCPO is really focusing on, and I understood completely the questions that are being raised, because these are part of your strategic objectives. These are part of what the organ is looking at. When we transition into this process, part of the strength of the SADC Parliamentary Forum will come from the synergy of the SADC institutional framework as a whole. And therefore, looking at post-adoption strategies, we will be able to find ways together through the Executive Secretary to find how we can continue to collaborate and look at areas that can really conform to the objectives of why you were founded. Selection of issues that are relevant to the regional integration agenda will be of paramount importance. And that is why we work through a joint working group, which is made out of the SADC Secretariat and the SADC Parliamentary Forum. We submit issues for consideration, and these will uniquely constitute what the SADC region finds as important. And they'll be customized to the level of the regional economic integration of SADC. With these few words, Director of Ceremony, I believe that I'm basically saying this is work in progress that we should both do. We'll continue to consult each other. We have the support of the organ through this participation, and therefore we'll continue to engage with you through a multi-sectoral approach that would allow us to learn more from this engagement and how best we can also pool the few resources that we have, refer what needs to be referred to the organ, and allow for processes to advance what the SADC has already agreed to through most of the protocols that have been agreed to. I thank you and wish you a good afternoon. We will be waiting for your comments. Dr. Greenberg will definitely give them consideration in consultation with the working group, and we hope to learn from you beyond what has been put on the table today.
Thank you very much, Madam SG, for those parting remarks. Let's continue to engage. Let's send in comments. Let's continue to discuss these issues so that we come up with the best model law that speaks to what we want to see in our SADC region. Thank you very much for your participation, and thank you for allowing me to be your facilitator this afternoon. I wish you the best in the rest of your endeavors today and any day. May the good Lord protect